In some ways, I think narcolepsy supported me as I was growing up because there was so much sensory overwhelm that it's like, okay, sleep is the only escape I have. And then other times it was like autism helped me because I could be drilled to a task or like on top of my principles, like I'm gonna do this no matter what. And learning to make friends with both of them and to not see either as like an enemy.
Welcome, everybody. I am Matt Horsnell, and I am proud to introduce this topic of autism and sleep, presented by Project Sleep. We are very excited to kind of dig into this conversation. We're only going to be able to skim the surface because I feel like it's a very nuanced discussion, but really excited to get this kickstarted with both a clinical perspective and also a patient perspective. So next slide, please. So we have a few special guests that I'm going to allow them to do some quick introductions. I will go ahead and kickstart since I'm already talking. But my name is Matthew Horsnow. People call me Matt unless I'm in trouble. And I am a person with narcolepsy, and also I live on the spectrum. Lizzie?
Yeah, I'm Lizzie, and I was diagnosed with narcolepsy first, and then I went through the Rising Voices program, and I found myself on the spectrum of autism, thanks to a lot of people I work with.
All right. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Oglesby. I am Project Sleep's Programs Manager. My connection to this topic is that I've been married to Gary, and we have gone through a lot with sleep and just discovering that he's on the autism spectrum as well.
Thank you, Lauren. Gary?
I am Lauren's husband, and so I'm self-diagnosed on the spectrum at, I guess, age 38, I think it was. I do not have a formal sleep diagnosis, but I've had issues with my sleep throughout the years, and then after the autism self-diagnosis, that kind of gave us a new perspective on those things. And so I've participated in a program to help folks on the spectrum with sleep issues, but I do not have a diagnosis.
Thank you, Gary. Dr. Mallow?
Yeah, hi, I'm Beth Malow. I'm a professor of neurology and pediatrics at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville. I have two sons who are now adults on the autism spectrum, who had sleep issues, and I really got drawn into this amazing field through them. I've worked in melatonin safety, behavioral sleep education, and other areas, and I'm very excited to share my expertise with you all and learn from you today.
Thank you, Dr. Mallow. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Moore.
Hi, I'm Melissa Moore. I am a pediatric sleep psychologist, and my passion is really helping families to get the best sleep that they can get. I also have two sons, one of whom is on the autism spectrum and currently and in the past had some sleep challenges. So I'm in it from both sides.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Moore. So we are going to kind of keep this conversation in kind of three buckets rather. We're going to be talking about lived experience, so how autism impacts sleep, and and then the next bucket's going to be clinical and research perspective. So we're going to be looking at it from both an patient to HCP and then also an HCP to patient perspective, and then discuss resources that are available. And before we move on to the conversation, everyone gets to enjoy me listening off the disclaimer statements. So this discussion is meant to provide information and resources and is not intended as medical advice. If you have questions about your own or loved one's sleep health or other medical questions, we recommend you speak to your healthcare provider. We will also create a toolkit with more information and resources that will be linked in a description when it becomes available. Also, I want to mention that the choice between person first language and identity first language is nuanced. As the facilitator, I'm going to strive to use person first language, which is consistent with Project Sleep's effort across the sleep community. However, it is a nuanced conversation, and so people may use different terminology, but just kind of wanted to fully acknowledge that. We do have a great conversation lined up with a specific flow in mind. However, best dialogue is never fully scripted. So, to quote Robert Burns, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. So with that, I'm excited to jump into the conversation. Awesome. So going to go ahead and kickstart the conversation thinking about lived experience. And I wanted to toss the ball to Gary first. Um, Gary, can you describe how autism has impacted your relationship with sleep? During some prior conversations that you and I have had, you mentioned some childhood challenges that I think have kind of carried over.
Yeah, so for most of my childhood, I was very much a late sleeper. And even in my elementary school years, my mom would come into the room when I'm supposed to be getting out of bed and would like essentially dress me while I was still laying in bed because it took me a long time to get out of bed. And that has kind of it's not so much a late sleeper thing now. As an adult, it has kind of evolved more to I have a lot of trouble stopping activities in the evening in order to get to sleep. So I don't have a very regular sleep schedule, like a regular time that I go to sleep or anything like that. For a number of years, now my employment has been very supportive of me in all of this and pretty much let me work my own schedule for many years. And unfortunately, I have to say I probably took too much advantage of that. And so there was several years where I was, operating on a schedule where I was almost going to sleep at sunrise and waking up in the afternoon and working all night. And so that has until I found that program that we're going to talk about later, that really kind of dominated my sleep and really affected my home life as well, as I'm sure Lauren could attest, and family life and everything else. So it has been, once I am asleep, I can usually stay asleep, but just like I said, getting on a regular schedule has been very difficult.
Thank you for that, Gary. And you actually did a wonderful transition because I wanted to toss that to Lauren. So how have those challenges that Gary described kind of impacted your relationship, and what does that look like for both of you guys?
Well, so Gary and I have been together for about 11 years. The first 4 or so years, I don't think we recognized that he was on the spectrum at all. We kind of stumbled upon that. I read an article that I was like, oh, wow, this sounds like us. And then that led to more research. And finally, after a few months of reading and like closely identifying with people's experiences that we were reading about, I think we kind of came to the conclusion that Gary was probably on the spectrum. And so when that happened, Gary said it kind of reframed how we experienced his sleep issues, but it was still a real challenge for both of us, I think. When you're first married, you kind of go into it with like high hopes and expectations, and that wasn't our reality. We found ourselves really not able to be doing things together during the day, especially on weekends when we had free time because our schedules just weren't in sync at all. And we also had a young son. And from my son and Gary's stepson. And that left me kind of as like the primary caretaker and coordinator of all of his activities and needs and everything. So, yeah, it was really challenging and frustrating. And it felt isolating, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, it's definitely, I know personally with my own experiences with narcolepsy and autism as well. The impact is not just on me, it also extends out to all familiar relationships, both with my kids and then also with my partner. So I appreciate both of you guys willing to be very vulnerable and kind of sharing how that impacted you. Want to toss this to Dr. Moore, kind of tying it back to that impact question. Can you speak to the impact of neurodivergence on your son's relationship with sleep and how that has impacted kind of you as a parent as well? And then I have a follow-up too, and how have those experiences kind of changed your perspective as a sleep specialist?
Yeah, I had been doing this work for about 10 years before I had my son. And so I had an idea of, what the behavioral strategies were and what good sleep habits were. And I found that it just wasn't enough. And, my husband would say, why was he up last night? What was happening? And there wasn't always an answer to that question. There rarely was an answer to that question. And so the way that it manifests itself in my son, what his sleep challenges are sometimes he cannot fall asleep until very late, and he's still a kid, so school start times are what they are. At other times, he'll wake up during the night and just be awake for a very long time and have a really difficult time settling down. He also, relating to what Gary was saying, he definitely has a hard time stopping things and starting the next thing, even though we've had the same bedtime routine since he was basically like 6 months old. It's still challenging. And so, one of the things that I learned is that you might need to start in the same place with those behavioral strategies, but they might not always be enough. And you asked your follow-up question about the impact on my parenting. And I would say I had a certain idea of what kind of parent I thought I was going to be. And for example, like I made all their own food when they were babies. I sometimes even picked the vegetables that I was, making into their baby food. They had no screens and still. So I would say the way that it has impacted me as a parent is that I've had to become a lot more flexible and be okay with some of the things that he needs. So, for example, and I write about this in my book, there was a period of time, a long period of time where he would be hungry at night. And part of it was because of medication he took in the day, so he wasn't hungry during the day, but he had this idea that he wanted multiple snacks in a row, but not together in his room. So he would want one thing and then he would wake me up a little bit later and ask for another thing, and very specific about what he wanted. And then we just kind of came to a place where I was like, these are the things I'm going to leave on your nightstand. You can eat them when you want. And it took him a little bit of time to get used to that too, not having me bring the things in order when he wanted them, but just doing it independently. And, I feel sorry for his dentist because he does eat during the night. So far, we're okay, but we all sleep a lot better because of that.
I love what you said there, and it reminds me of, there was a chapter in my life where I was a single parent for my three kids with primary custody, and I had to extend myself a lot of grace and extend my kids a lot of grace just because of how things were doing it, and kind of listening to you share, that anecdote. It sounds like you're extending grace, to your son there, but also giving yourself some grace to not try to do things in that structured manner that maybe you thought at the very beginning, and just really appreciate you opening up about that. I'm going to call a little audible on my notes because I would love to also hear Dr. Mallow's kind of same question there. Can you speak to the impact of neurodivergence on both of your son's relationship with sleep, and also you as a parent and as a clinician, how that may have shaped your approach?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to say that you probably have heard the saying, when you've seen one person with autism, you've seen one person with autism. And the personalized approach that we brought to our research. And I also wrote a book called Solving Sleep Problems in Children with Autism, a guide for frazzled families. Uh, personalized, right? So every kid is different. One of my children really needed more of a dark, quiet space to just chill, very extroverted. So maybe he just needed that at night. My younger son was anxious and he needed the door open. He needed to hear noises coming from the entire house. He needed a night light on. So every kid needs different things. Some need weighted blankets, some it doesn't really do anything for them. My older son needed music playing on a continuous CD player, and we went ahead with it, even though as a sleep specialist, I might have been taught, don't become dependent on things like that. But for my older son, that just kept him asleep, just hearing the same music over and over. So I would say the personalized approach is probably the biggest thing I've learned from my kids. And then I feel like we need to do a better job explaining to people that when we sleep and we sleep well, we're a whole new person in the morning, right? And a lot of parents feel like it's too much work and they're too busy to do that work of sleep and bedtime routines and all of that, because they've got so many other things going on, like meltdowns and aggression and trouble at school and grades and whatever. But in the end, if you're sleeping better and your kid's sleeping better, right, you're going to be so much better. So I always tell parents that remember how you feel when you haven't slept. You're more apt to send that snarky email that you'll regret. And remember, your kids are like that too. And if you can get them to sleep, everything will be better during the day. And that's what I've learned from my work as a doctor and a researcher.
That's fantastic, and it kind of warms my heart to hear you guys talking about how you've supported your children, and just gives me a lot of hope. I know that unfortunately that's not everybody's experience, but knowing that there's this great example that both of you are providing, it's truly beautiful. And also you reminded me of how I often will have to save my emails in draft, particularly if I've had a rough night's sleep, because what I think at maybe 7:30 in the morning or even 10:30 at night is not maybe how I'll feel in another time during the day. So that's a good life lesson, I think, for me too, to kind of live by. Want to look kind of pivot the question slightly and toss the ball to Lizzie. As someone who has narcolepsy and autism, I have a tough time like untangling that knot. I don't even know if it's a knot that you can even untangle. But for the sake of the conversation, can you share about how you've navigated living with autism and narcolepsy, and maybe some of the challenges that that's presented with in your life?
Yeah, for sure. And I think where I'll start is that, like, the way narcolepsy presents itself, I was able to explain away a lot of things. It's like, well, we could attribute this to sleep, this and this and this and this. And like, I worked with a therapist for like since like 2017, and it's like, okay, this is a chronic illness thing, but there was always this like inkling of like there's something else maybe going on. And I think it comes down to how I like conceptualize and understand things, where like what sleep meant to me growing up. Like I took the stories of like wherever I saw them. So I'm like, well, sleep is a thing that you do when you're exhausted or you don't do that much. It's not that important because there's so many other important things. And as Dr. Moore and Mala were talking about, like, oh, staying up really late and having this hard time transitioning, stopping and starting things. As I, well, even autism, like, I I work in healthcare and like I was given a definition of autism and I'm like, okay, that's autism. And as I met and worked with more people with autism, I was like, I would have people tell me, wow, you really understand them. Like, I didn't think of that. And I'm like, well, it makes all the sense to me because I experience this too. Um, so one concept that like I've learned about is autistic inertia. And all of these things are like, how do I word this? To me, if there's a label or a concept that helps you understand yourself better and make changes, run with that. Like Dr. Malo was saying, personalize it. And so, like, this concept of autistic inertia is that it's used to describe the difficulty both starting and stopping activities, and how there was a paper I read that talked that literally just gave the experiences of people on like how that felt and how it affected what you were doing outside of that, and also the external factors that affected you, like the expectations of the people around you, the activity in the environment, and the impacts it was having on me and my relationships. Because it's like, I have the desire to do these things, but like without external intervention, like Dr. Moore was saying, like, oh, I used to bring you like these things at night, and I had no language for that. So it's like I finding out, okay, this is happening, but then communicating that is it another bucket. So I don't know where this lands, but it's been the journey of just giving the attention to the things and also understanding like, wow, these things are constantly like interplaying. And in some ways, I think narcolepsy supported me as I was growing up because there was so much sensory overwhelm that it's like, okay, sleep is the only escape I have. And then other times it was like autism helped me because I could be drilled to a task or like on top of my principles, like I'm gonna do this no matter what. Um, and learning to make friends with both of them and to not see either as like an enemy, I think has been also a big support and learning curve, but very fulfilling for me.
I love how I love how you landed that actually, because for me, kind of learning to accept that narcolepsy is a part of me was significantly more challenging than learning to accept that autism was a part of me. Also, it was easy to point when something happened and be like, that was narcolepsy causing that. Because it was the sleepiness, the frustration that was associated was the most impactful. And I think having a supportive partner helped me recognize that autism is also strongly at play. You know, when we were in the early dating days, she we were talking and she was like, "Have you ever been diagnosed with autism?" And I don't know if it was my collection of invertebrate fossils or the fact that I always had the exact same drink, and basically loved my routine. Who knows? But there was some tells there. She's also a licensed professional counselor. So again, but it helped me realize that like they're both part of me, and I don't like need to, basically just accept that that's going to impact who I am. And again, it's not so important for me to untangle that knot. It's just to kind of acknowledge that that's a messy knot, and it's going to be tough to say this is what's going on versus that's what's going on. Now, we heard Gary talk about routine, and you talked a little bit about, autism helping you stay focused on a particular topic. Has that helped you at all with your own sleep routine?
Yes, I think it has because it's very easy for me to like the logic of, okay, when I do this, this happens. When I do that, that happens. But the knowing a thing up here and then knowing it like full body, I think is its own kind of amusement park. And so it's very easy for me to understand the reasoning for doing a thing, but then I need a lot of support to bring that into reality. So like, which this is a tiny celebration. For years, I would go to bed and then I'd be on my phone and then I would be doing all kinds of things. And then it's like, well, no wonder I would have less attention or energy the next day. And I knew why. I knew why. But like, I had to, here again is like another layer of nuance, untangling sensations and emotions about things because I have a hard time recognizing them and they can be really delayed, like hours, days, weeks later, I may feel a thing from way back. And so I have had to become like a social emotional like Jedi to be able to recognize my own things. to address why am I turning to my phone? What am I actually looking for that is missing elsewhere? And then feeling through the emotions of that, and then having enough, like being able to forgive myself for that. Because if I'm putting pressure on it, I'm not going to make any changes to my behavior. But I've learned also that when the conditions are suitable, it's easy for me to make the right choice. And I'm like, whoa, what is this magic? So in the last couple months, I've like suddenly just been, not suddenly, it's been incremental over years, really. Been able to be like, I'm choosing sleep. I am choosing my dreams versus not consciously being like, I need to look at this, I need to check that. Da, 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 da.
I love that. Also, I feel like it was more like a Yoda Jedi level answer that you gave. That was really solid. Um, listening to you talk too, it reminded me of how autism impacts cataplexy for me, both in a positive and negative way. There's a lot of times where I can detach from something that may be going on. Other times I may find myself having an oversized reaction to something and having to kind of check that. So, definitely something I'm going to kind of sit down and contemplate on a little bit more because I feel like there's a lot of interplay there.
Can I bring one tiny thing?
Certainly.
Um, I've, because I work with non-speaking autistic people and have made friends, and what is super common among them is dyspraxia and apraxia. And I am have become like a special interest is learning more about the nuance between cataplexy and dyspraxia in this motor piece. I don't know if something's there, but like pattern recognition. I'm noticing things that I'm like, wow, autistic inertia, apraxia, cataplexy. I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know, but I'm bringing it here because I feel like there's something and there's curiosity of like, could there be crossover? Could there be applications across it? Yeah, just wanted to say something.
No, I love that. Um, so wanted to kind of transition again to some clinical conversation. During our roundtable discussion a few years ago, a fellow PWN shared about the challenges that her young son was having. Her son was exhibiting signs of narcolepsy with cataplexy, so NT1, and due to challenges with autism and separation from his parents um, during the testing and diagnostic process, he ended up failing multiple MSLTs before he ended up getting his diagnosis, and there was a delay there. And when I was listening to her share, it also was kind of a light bulb moment for like the challenges that autism may present in clinical settings. And so kind of transitioning over to the piece, I wanted to kind of start from the HCP interaction, so patient to HCP, and then flip that and ask the clinicians to kind of um, address the same, just a different direction. But so again, looking at Gary and Lauren, how has autism impacted your ability to communicate with HCPs? I got a couple of follow-ups there, so if you want to go ahead, Gary.
Well, I would say that our first attempt to reach out to someone and get some answers was not did not go the way that we would have hoped. I felt like I don't know if it was the way that we presented the problem or it did not feel like I was believed a little bit, or that maybe I was believed, but the reasons that I was proposed is, I wonder if this is going on, or I wonder if this is going on. Like all of those were kind of um, dismissed, and I felt like we got an answer that was very how do I put this? Tough love, kind of. And it really wasn't a great experience. And we kind of pulled back from that. And I kind of stopped looking for other resources at that moment. And luckily, Lauren kind of stayed on it and found this other resource that was a much better fit for us, I felt like. We were talking earlier about the importance of a personalized approach, and I felt like that was what I really received in the program that I was in. And so it was, to me, I felt like it was kind of a night and day experience, based on which provider we went to.
And I want you to explain that program a little bit, but I also wanted to toss it to Lauren to share a little bit from her perspective. As a partner, how have you advocated and supported for Gary? What was it like, and how are you able to do that?
Yeah, well, when we had that initial appointment with the sleep specialist who was kind of dismissive and bootstrapping, um, I was, it was a video call and I was in the room. And initially I was like, I'm going to stay out of this. But eventually, like, I did, like, with Gary's permission, join the call to try to, like, explain things from my perspective as somebody who was working for a sleep organization at the time. And, um, it just wasn't really going anywhere. So fortunately, I was able to use my professional network, and actually found uh, Dr. Mallow, who was living in a totally different state from us and referred us back to this program that Gary participated in, which was in the town where we lived. Um, so it was really remarkable to me that we were able to make that connection and find the program that Gary was able to participate in. And I feel really fortunate that we did. And I'll let Gary explain more about the program.
Yeah. And I love this story, not for the struggle that y'all experienced, but because you also have the book ended of like a negative experience that led to a positive experience. And I feel like that, there's a lot of lessons to kind of be gleaned from that too. So Gary, could you describe a little bit about the program that you underwent, kind of high level, and then, how that's supported you now?
Yeah, before I get into that though, I just want to respond to what Lauren was saying. Like I really felt like I very much was in a position of like I feel kind of defeated by this experience, and Lauren kind of taking those reins and saying like, no, we're going to find another resource for you. Like that was really huge for us. And I really appreciate Lauren doing that. But yeah, so this program, there's a we live near the University of Virginia, and they have a Sheila Johnson Center, which is sort of a like speech and language services program, but some of those services involve services for people on the autism spectrum. And unfortunately, it looks like the program I was in, it looks like may not still be active. So I couldn't find what the name for it was at the time. But essentially, I would go in. It was almost sort of like a therapy session. I would go in for sessions once a week with a specialist, and she would sit and listen to me explain the challenges that we had, and what I've tried that has worked or hasn't worked, and those sort of things. And we kind of formulated a plan that it certainly felt personalized to me. I don't know if they were asking them to push this plan on everybody, but like it felt personalized to me. But in my case, we kind of came up with this chart where I would keep record of like when I was going to bed each night, like getting in bed versus actually falling asleep, versus like what time I would wake up and what time I would actually get out of bed. And I believe we also had like what time I was eating meals on there and stuff like that, because obviously there's some at least correlation, if not causation, with eating habits as well. So and that, like, it almost kind of if you've heard the term like gamify, like it almost kind of like created this structure for me to hold myself accountable, I guess. And on nights where I'm writing down, yeah, I went to bed at 5 o'clock because in the morning because I was up making a playlist of my 20th favorite band's greatest hits or something. Like then I would have to go into my next appointment, and like sort of explain that, and not to advocate that like, shame is a good tool or anything, but like that actually was really helpful to me to like have to sort of present my thought process to someone else, and then kind of realize like, wow, this does sound pretty crazy, that this is what I was doing. And so over time, there was also a lot of motivation with we had just moved our kid to another school that we needed to commute to. It was about a 50-minute commute. And I really wanted, as a parent, I really wanted to be doing my part to drive our kid to school in the mornings and stuff like that try to share those duties with Lauren. So like that sort of motivation from a parental side also helped me I need to figure this out because I need to be able to get up at 6 in the morning and drive my kid to school and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess the main part of the program really was just that keeping a chart of what time I was doing things on each day. And, like I said, I think that accountability just sort of gradually started pulling me in the right direction.
I appreciate you kind of getting into those details too, and also the motivation. As a parent, my kids have been a driving force behind getting my self together in terms of living my best life with narcolepsy, and in so many ways I can relate to that kind of being um, a force pushing me forward. Um, Lizzie, I wanted to ask you a question too about kind of interactions between you and HCPs. How has autism impacted your ability to communicate with HCPs? I mean, you're obviously very capable at both understanding what's going on and kind of sharing your thoughts. Also want to kind of add a follow-up. Do you have any preference on kind of modes of communication with notes going away too? Because I think that's an important consideration when it comes to that. So again, how has it impacted you and kind of preferences that you may have?
Yeah, I will say that like I have had an experience that was like not so great with a provider too, where it was pre like autism and I was just like I was taking very specific notes and I bring that to like my interactions because I'm like I may forget something by the time I walk in the door. And I was like I feel like there's something else going on, and I'm throwing out ideas, but I'm open to it being something different. And it felt like this provider was just reading it as me looking for another diagnosis. And they basically said, like, I think you may be as good as you're gonna get. So, and I was like, oh Lord. Um, that's kind of been the exception. But yeah, I think the autism has helped me because I'll learn medical terminology and I figure out like how do I need to talk to this person so that they understand it. But that did not come initially because I would say to a provider like I'm so tired, but no one ever asked me like what does tired mean to you? Like, oh, you're struggling to stay alert and awake like a majority of the day. Wow, that's sleepiness. So, yeah, the both and of it, I would say.
No, great answer there. Kind of pivoting now to the HCP perspective. I consider both of you folks who I would send my kids to if I had concerns about their sleep or about any neurodivergence they may be experiencing. So I'm looking forward to kind of talking through what are maybe some best practices that you can recommend for either parents or people, adults living with autism to kind of approach. I'm going to toss the ball to you, Dr. Moore, first, and then Dr. Mao to kind of close that out.
I think there's a balance between limits and flexibility. And this is something that I really learned from my son. We might have an idea like bedtime is this time, and he might tell me, I'm not tired. And I really have to listen to him because he knows what he's talking about. And it's not just a ploy to, whereas my other son might say that, and I'm like, get into bed. But he knows when he's not tired. And so we work through what's a quiet activity he could do. And when he is tired, he gets into bed. So I think really listening, and when you're working with non-speaking individuals, really listening to their parents and not just jumping in and trying to change the whole plan. This is true with electronics. Sometimes someone will come to me and say the only way that my child will stay in their bed in order to calm down enough to fall asleep is to do X, Y, or Z. And for me to just take that away is completely invalidating. So I think really, really listening, being willing to tailor the approach to the individual person and the family, and recognizing that even within sleep and autism, there are other factors. There's where you live, who else you live with, and all these things have to be integrated. I say we have to merge the ideal with the real, because we know what the sleep ideals are, and we know what other good habits are. We know we're supposed to floss our teeth every day. We know we're supposed to reapply sunscreen after a few hours. It's the doing it that is the challenge. And so figuring out how to make that happen. And another thing is that I was at a conference recently, and someone who's incredibly experienced, a wonderful clinician, was talking about how amazing bedtime routines are and how they're such a great time for bonding and this relaxing, wonderful wind down time. And all I could think about was all of the neurodivergent people that bedtime is like the worst part of their day, the hardest part of their day. So I think kind of just really listening and integrating those things into your recommendations. Those are the things that are important. And the last thing I want to say, I've been doing this for 20 years. So I've seen lots and lots of families, and I have never reached the point where there's nothing else to try. And so I always have hope. Even families that I've been seeing for years, I still believe there's more that we can do and that there's more that we can try, whether it's something sensory or a change in habits or communicating something differently. I really believe that there's always something that we can try to help people get better sleep.
No, I love that answer. And then occasionally I'll talk to peers, particularly in the sleep space, and they'll say that their doctors kind of run out of ideas. They don't know what else to try. And usually my suggestion is if they say they've run out of ideas, you may need to get a new doctor because that you've hit your wall with that provider. Again, that's not to condemn the provider, but again, there's other tools in the toolbox or other approaches, and I loved how you pointed that out. And I don't know if you could read my notes or read my mind, but I was hoping that you would make the comment there on the ideal versus the family's real piece. So I appreciate you sprinkling that in. That really resonated with me when I was kind of reading through your materials. So kind of same question to you, Dr. Mallow.
I think
Um,
autonomy. I really do. I think that we all need autonomy. I also, I don't know if it was Lizzie or Laurel, but the idea of the strengths that autistic folks have, which include the really wanting to say what you believe and feeling it really strongly. And what I found with parents is that, and kids, teens and adults who I take care of, is that they really want to be in control of what's going on. So even simple things like, hey, do you want to divide up your stimulant and take morning and afternoon? Let's say they have narcolepsy, or take it all at one time. Uh, we've done a lot with melatonin and melatonin safety. And rather than telling people what I think they should do, I give them blogs I've written. I think you'll have that in your notes on how they can decide for themselves if melatonin is right for them or for their kids, because there is a lot now on it being unregulated and such. And I'm actually a big proponent of it, but the parents and the adults, they have to figure it out on their own, and they appreciate that when I think they appreciate it when I don't tell them what I think they should do, but I give them ideas for how they might look at the literature and make up their own minds and make their own decisions. I think that I really value that about autism. I value the independent thinker aspects. We need more of that in our society right now.
100%. That's a rabbit hole that I could go down for sure. I did want to point out that you said there, my favorite physicians that I see are ones who empower me and also who we share decision making in treatment approaches and how we're gonna help live my best life with whether it be autism, sleep apnea, narcolepsy, like all of those things I think are critical. And if I feel empowered, I'm also more likely to follow through on the steps that are made because I have an taken an active role there. So I really appreciate that perspective. As we kind of transition to resources, I did want to also step up on my soapbox too. One of the things that I've been a big proponent of, and I know there's a lot of support at Project Sleep about it, is plain language summaries. So existing research or even prior research, making sure that it's written in an accessible language. And Lizzie mentioned that she's able to pick up on medical lexicon fairly easily. And unfortunately, that's not the case with the overall population. Academic research is written at a very high level, and so plain language summaries or even like a plain language executive summary of research can be just an invaluable tool for people to consume the research as it's coming out. I know in the sleep space, there's a lot of people interested in reading what's coming out, and instead of having to sit down and get out the thesaurus or take 2 hours to digest even the introduction, it's very helpful to have some of that laid out for you guys. So just kind of wanted to get up there and mention that. I did want to kind of talk through first to on the resources piece, and there's going to be some, but I also want to ask specifically, Dr. Malow, you've authored some pivotal research on autism and sleep. Is there a research publication that you've been a part of that you can point to, or a webinar that you've done that you can point to? We can make sure it's included in the materials if it hasn't already been sent over.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things. One is I did mention the melatonin blogs, and I think that is on your list. I also have done some webinars for various groups, mixed groups of parents and professionals, including there's a Let's Sleep group. It's similar. It's the similar name to yours, but it's Let's Sleep. I've also done some work for the Autism Research Institute on autism and sleep. And I guess my most pivotal paper is on behavioral sleep education for parents of kids with autism. So I will get those to you, and there's a lot on me on the web. People can also search for my name or Google or whatever, and they should be able to come up with some videos and other resources that are free.
Definitely did an Autism Research Institute webinar viewing to prepare for this, just to get an idea about what's kind of out there. So appreciate your voice and always putting it out there for us.
Sure.
I would love for Dr. Moore to talk about her upcoming book. And I think this is just a good opportunity to let everybody know what it's about and what they can expect to learn from it.
So the Good Sleep Guide for Neurodivergent Kids is coming out March 4th. And it's a comprehensive resource that really brings together science, explanations of science, and why neurodiverse people might have more challenges with sleep. That's the first part. And the second part is really applying that research and giving some practical ideas about improving sleep. And sprinkled in are stories from my professional life and also from my life as a parent. And also just, I'm a real person. And I struggle with this stuff too. So I really, one of my purposes in writing this book is so that people don't feel alone, either by having sleep challenges or by parenting someone with sleep challenges. And so that's my book.
And I just want to also acknowledge that's also a form of plain language. You taking time to break it down, adding anecdotes, and really kind of reinforcing the message behind the research is invaluable. So I appreciate you writing this and getting this out there to the community.
Thank you. Yeah, I love when people explain science in a plain language way. I was telling someone the other day, when I hear the evidence, it's like a warm, cozy blanket for me. So I really love it when people include that and include those explanations.
So we have several of the resources that Dr. Mallow's created or been part of there. Also, Lizzie recommends I Will Die on This Hill as a great book for folks. And then the All Our Brave Hearts podcast. Specifically, we found some stuff about sleep in episodes 17 and 22. So all these resources are going to be in our toolkit that we're creating and also linked in the description.
Very good. I just wanted to take the last few minutes just kind of for closing statements. If we can kind of go around the room, is there any kind of high level thoughts that you guys would like to sprinkle in or things that you would like to explore deeper? So maybe toss the ball to Gary first. maybe just a 1 or 2 minute breakdown of your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about something that both Dr. Mallow and Dr. Moore had said that I wanted to reinforce that that statement Dr. Moore made about there's always something else to try. Like I really believed that I was never going to fix my sleep issues and that this was going to be something that I would deal with. And I don't want to say they're fixed. I mean, it's an ongoing thing. I can easily fall off the wagon for a couple of days and and get, kind of on a delayed phase thing again. But I felt defeated before I found the right resource. So like I really believe that statement that there's always something else to try. And what Dr. Mallow was saying about the importance of autonomy, like the program I went through, I really felt like it wasn't they were helping me with my problem. It was they were giving me the tools to help myself with the problem. And so I just wanted to reinforce those 2 points that they made.
Yeah. Thank you, Gary. Kind of toss it to Lauren too for parting thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the program Gary went through and really eased up some of the challenges that we were having, and also just, it's been years since then, and I think looking at the strengths of our partnership and what Gary brings to the relationship in terms of things, where, I might not have capacity for, he does have capacity for. So rather than kind of like we've just had to adjust to what works for us and make sure to plan buffers, time buffers and not, I have like time anxiety. So like when I'm running late to something, I get extremely anxious and irritable, which dovetailed perfectly with us always running late to things. And that was kind of a perfect storm. So I've had to really kind of do my own work to um, identify my own challenges and where I can give, so I feel like it's something we still navigate, but it's we both learned how to work with it.
Yeah. I love the perspective that both of you can provide from the partner perspective too. I think that that's added a lot of enrichment to the conversation. Um, Lizzie, parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of piggyback off of what everyone else is saying. And um, like sometimes the change or the intervention or whatever you're trying isn't earth-shattering or like rocket science, but it's like the smallest doable step. And having like that connection with someone and the consistency of like, yeah, I so appreciate Lauren and Gary's interplay too, because it's like these are real relationships. We're dealing with the people who are in our lives. And we need that to see what actually works and what doesn't, so that you can learn from it.
Awesome. Let's go with Dr. Moore.
Well, I've learned so much just in this conversation, and I'm lucky enough to learn from the families that I work with and to learn from my family every single day. So I think being open to hearing people's experiences is really critical. My main takeaway is to find your people. And I feel like that's so critical, whether it's the right provider or a friend or people from Project Sleep. It's so important to have people that you connect with, that you feel understood by, and that you understand their perspective too. So I would say my main takeaway is find your people.
I love that. That's a nice life lesson in general too there. Um, Dr. Mallow?
I think my main takeaway, I also learned so much today, is how important the interaction is. And we learned this in science communication. It's not giving people information, it's hearing from them, right? About what they're perceiving and what they need. And that's how we can all learn together better. And that's really what I try to model in my work as a physician. So thank you all for an incredible experience today.
Thank you, Dr. Mallow. And I can say you truly do it as well as anybody I've ever met in terms of meeting folks where they are. It's been a pleasure to advocate alongside you, whether it be in Nashville, Washington, or in this space here as well. So I wanted to point to some patient advocacy organizations that may be potentially helpful. We were speaking about resources. A number of these groups also offer peer-to-peer support. And while there may not be a peer-to-peer support group that addresses sleep and autism, there are groups that you can find your people, as Dr. Moore was saying, find that network, that community that you can share. So looking at Hypersomnia Foundation, Narcolepsy Network, Project Sleep, of course, Wake Up Narcolepsy, Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, the Arc of the United States, Communication for All, and International Association for Spelling to Communicate. So just wanted to point to some of those patient and advocacy organizations. But again, echoing what Dr. Mallow was saying, my favorite part about advocacy and reaching across kind of the bridging the research and the clinical and the advocacy works is getting to have opportunities for conversations like this, because I always walk away feeling like there's so much that we can learn from each other, and we can move the ball forward better together than we can kind of individually. So it's great to kind of get together and work towards that goal. So again, it's been a privilege to kind of share this space with you and to learn from all of you, and just thank you so much on behalf of Project Sleep and on behalf of myself.